"I don't cook or clean," she said. Mafia boss smirked. "Good. I only want you to stay in my bed." The rain in Graybridge was not the kind that washed things clean. It was a heavy, industrial drizzle that seemed to press the soot from the old steel mills right into the pavement, turning the city into a smear of charcoal and gray. Mara Ellis watched a droplet trace a path down the window of the logistics office and felt a kinship with it. She was just gravity-fed through the system, moving downward, tired and transparent. At 26 years old, Mara felt like she had lived 3 lifetimes, none of them particularly fun. The clock on the wall read 5 o'clock in the afternoon, signaling the end of her first shift. Her back ached from 6 hours of filing invoices for trucking routes she would never travel, managed by a supervisor who thought verbal appreciation was a sign of weakness. She did not have the luxury of going home to rest. She had exactly 2 hours to change, eat something that did not require a stove, and get to the Onyx room for her bartending shift. This was the reality of her independence. It was exhausted, caffeinated, and relentless, but it was hers. The alternative was the sprawling, overheated house in the working-class neighborhood of East Graybridge, where her parents lived, and where she had made the mistake of going for Sunday dinner the previous night. The memory of it still made her jaw tight as she gathered her purse. That dinner had been a disaster. The dining room had smelled of pot roast and judgment. Her mother, Linda, had set the table with the good china, a silent signal that she expected a performance of gratitude and traditional values. "You look tired, Mara," her mother had said, spooning potatoes onto a plate with aggressive force. "If you moved back home, you could save money. You would not have to work 2 jobs. You could focus on finding a husband." Mara had gripped her fork. "I am not looking for a husband, Ma. I am looking to pay off my student loans and get a marketing job that actually uses my degree." Her father, Frank, had snorted from the head of the table. "A degree? Fat lot of good that does you when you are barely making rent. I saw those takeout boxes in your recycling bin when I dropped off that mail for you. You are wasting money because you are too lazy to cook." It was the word lazy that had snapped the tether of her patience. She worked 60 hours a week. She slept 5. She paid for every stitch of clothing on her back and every inch of the cramped apartment she called home. "I am not lazy," Mara had said, her voice shaking with the effort to keep it level. "I am efficient. I do not have time to spend 2 hours peeling potatoes." "That is your problem," her mother had countered, pointing the serving spoon at her. "No man wants a wife who cannot keep a home. It is basic nature. Mara, you need to learn proper wife duties. You need to know how to take care of a man." Mara had stood up then, the chair screeching against the linoleum. "I do not cook or clean for anyone," she had declared, the words ringing in the silence of the dining room. "I am not going to be a maid who happens to be married. I want to be valued for my mind, not my housekeeping. If a man wants a servant, he can hire one." She had walked out before dessert, and she had not answered her mother's 3 voicemails since now. Stepping out of the office building into the damp chill of the evening, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked the screen, shielding it from the rain. It was not her mother this time. It was Kyle. Kyle was her ex-boyfriend, a man who had broken up with her 6 months ago because she worked too much, only to realize that he missed having someone to organize his life. "Just thinking about you," the text read. "You should quit that bar job. It makes you look cheap. A real woman should be home at night. Let's talk." Mara stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the delete button. It was always the same refrain. Act more like a woman, shrink. Be softer, be quieter, be present only when it is convenient. She deleted the thread without replying and shoved the phone back into her coat. She would rather scrub bar mats until 4 in the morning than be the accessory to someone else's life. By the time she reached the Onyx room, the city had shifted from gray to neon. The club was an upscale establishment downtown, the kind of place where cocktails cost $20 and the bass line of the music was felt in the chest rather than heard. It was pretentious, loud, and the tips were the only thing keeping her afloat. She slipped into the back entrance, swapping her sensible office cardigan for a black-fitted tank top and dark jeans. The break room was buzzing with nervous energy. Jerry, the general manager, was pacing back and forth, wiping sweat from his receding hairline with a handkerchief. "Listen up, everyone," Jerry said, his voice jumping an octave. "We have a special situation tonight. The VIP section has been bought out for the entire night." Mara tied her apron around her waist, unimpressed. "We have VIP buyouts every weekend. Jerry, why are you sweating through your shirt? This is different," Jerry hissed, glancing at the door as if he expected it to be kicked in. "This is the Moretti group." The room went quiet. Even the new busboy stopped chewing his gum. In Graybridge, the name Moretti was not just a name. It was the reason construction projects finished early or never started at all. It was the reason certain warehouses on the docks were never inspected by customs. It was the Moretti crime family, though the newspapers politely called them distinct business entrepreneurs. "I do not want any screw-ups," Jerry continued, pointing a shaking finger at the staff. "Do not look them in the eye for too long. Do not ask for autographs. Do not ask questions. If they want a bottle, you run. If they tell you to leave, you disappear. Got it?" Mara rolled her eyes, grabbing her serving tray. She did not care if they were the Mafia or the Pope. They tipped 20%. She would serve them whatever they wanted with a smile. She just needed to pay her rent. The VIP section was a raised platform overlooking the dance floor, separated by velvet ropes and heavy security. Mara was assigned to the main bar, but halfway through the night, the waitress for the VIP section came down looking pale and shaking. "I cannot go back up there," the girl whispered to Mara, clutching a tray of empty glasses. "One of them looked at me and I dropped a lime. I think I'm going to be sick." Mara sighed, wiping down the mahogany counter. "Go take a break. Sarah, I will cover it." She took the tray and headed up the stairs, moving past the bouncers who nodded her through. The air up here was different. It was cooler, smelling of expensive cologne, cigar smoke, and danger. There were about 10 men in the section. They were not laughing or shouting like the usual finance bros who rented the space. They sat in low leather booths, speaking in hushed tones, watching the room with predatory alertness. They wore suits that cost more than Mara's car, the fabric tailored to hide what lay beneath, though Mara could see the subtle bulges under their jackets. Guns. Definitely guns. In the center of the booth sat a man who made the others look like children. He was leaning back, one arm draped over the leather seat, holding a glass of amber liquid with long, steady fingers. He had dark hair, cut short and severe, and eyes that were the color of espresso, dark, intense, and unreadable. He was listening to a man beside him, but his gaze was scanning the club below, tracking movement with the precision of a hunter. This was Luca Moretti. Mara approached the table, keeping her face neutral. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice clear over the thrum of the music, "can I clear these for you?" Luca stopped listening to his companion. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes landing on her. For a second, Mara felt a jolt go down her spine, a primal warning that she was standing too close to a fire. He did not say anything, just gave a barely perceptible nod. She reached for the empty glasses, moving efficiently. She was not shaking like Sarah. She was annoyed that these men thought they owned the city, annoyed that her feet hurt, and annoyed that the man in the center was devastatingly handsome in a way that made her want to smooth her hair. She was just turning to leave when a hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. It was not Luca. It was a man on the end of the booth, red-faced and slurring, clearly the only one who had indulged too much in the bottle. "Hey, sweetheart," the drunk man grinned, his grip bruisingly tight. "You got a name? You are a lot prettier than the last one. Why don't you sit down and have a drink with us?" Mara stiffened. Her reflex was instant. She twisted her wrist against the thumb, a move she had learned after years of bartending, trying to break his hold. "Let go of me," she said, her voice dropping to a warning tone. "I am working." "Come on, don't be a bitch," the man sneered, yanking her closer so that her hip bumped the table. "I said sit down." Before Mara could smash her tray into the man's face, which she was fully prepared to do, the air in the booth changed. It went from tense to freezing. Let her go. The voice was not loud. It was a low baritone, smooth like aged whiskey, but it carried a weight that cut through the noise of the club like a blade. Luca Moretti had not moved. He was still leaning back, his glass in hand, but his eyes were fixed on the drunk man with a look of bored, lethal promise. The drunk man blinked, his bravado evaporating instantly. He looked at Luca, then at his own hand on Mara's wrist, as if he hadn't realized it was there. He released her as if she burned him. "I was just playing, boss," the man stammered, shrinking back into the leather. No offense meant. Luca did not look at him. He looked at Mara. His gaze swept over her, taking in the red mark forming on her wrist, then traveled up to her face. He was assessing her, waiting to see if she would cry or run. Mara rubbed her wrist, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was not grateful. She was furious. She hated the way the other men looked at her now, like a stray dog that had been kicked and then saved. She hated feeling small. "I had that handled," she snapped, looking directly at Luca. The silence in the booth was absolute. The other men stared at her in shock. No one spoke to Luca Moretti that way. Luca's eyebrows rose slightly. A flicker of amusement danced in his dark eyes. He set his glass down on the table with a soft clink. "You had it handled?" he repeated, his voice laced with skepticism. "He is twice your size and armed. I know how to deal with drunks," Mara said, lifting her chin. "I do not need a knight in shining armor, especially not one who brings armed thugs into a place of business." One of the bodyguards started to stand up, his face darkening. "Watch your mouth, girl." Luca held up a hand, silencing his man instantly. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, bringing him closer to where she stood. The proximity was overwhelming. He smelled of sandalwood and cold rain. "You have a sharp tongue," he observed, his gaze dropping to her mouth before returning to her eyes. "Most people say thank you when they are rescued. I am not most people," Mara retorted, "and I am not a damsel. If you want to help, try tipping better." Luca laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound, as if he did not use it often. He looked her up and down, not with lechery, but with a sudden, intense curiosity. "If you are going to walk around with that much fire," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur that only she could hear, "you should have someone to watch your back. Everyone needs protection, sweetheart, even independent little things like you." The condescension in his tone, the implication that she was fragile, made her blood boil. It was her father's voice. It was Kyle's texts. It was the whole world telling her she was not enough on her own. "I don't need protection," she said, her voice sharp. "And I don't cook or clean for anyone, so do not think you can charm me." She didn't know why she said it. It was the line she had thrown at her parents, the manifesto of her life, bubbling up in her anger. Luca went still. The amusement shifted into something darker, something heavier. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if stripping away the bartender uniform and seeing the exhausted, defiant woman beneath. A slow, dangerous smirk curved his lips. It was the kind of smile that promised trouble, the kind of smile that could ruin a woman's life and make her thank him for it. He leaned in closer, until his face was inches from hers. She could feel the heat radiating from him. "Good," he whispered, the single word hanging in the air between them. Mara blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "I do not need a maid," Luca said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. "I have people for that." He paused, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a shameless, terrifying honesty. "I only want you to stay in my bed." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her breath hitched in her throat. It was vulgar. It was arrogant. It was the most shocking thing anyone had ever said to her. And God help her. A shiver of pure electricity shot straight down her spine. She stared at him, her lips parted, unable to form a comeback. His smirk deepened, knowing exactly what effect he had on her. "Now," he said, leaning back into the shadows of the booth as if the conversation was over, "go get me another drink, and keep the change." He tossed $100 bill onto her tray. Mara turned on her heel and walked away, her legs feeling unsteadily like jelly. She did not look back, but she could feel his eyes on her, heavy, possessive, weighted. She spent the rest of the night in a daze. She stayed behind the main bar, letting Sarah handle the VIP section, but every time she looked up, she found him watching her, across the crowded club, through the flashing lights and the haze of smoke. Luca Moretti was there. He wasn't talking to his men. He was watching her shake cocktails, watching her laugh with a regular, watching her wipe her forehead with the back of her hand. Whenever their eyes met, he didn't look away. He just offered that same lazy, knowing half-smile, raising his glass in a silent toast. It was a challenge. He was waiting for her to break. By the time the club closed at 2 a.m, Mara was exhausted in a way that went down to her bones. Her feet throbbed, and her mind was a mess of conflicting adrenaline. She cashed out her tips, more than she usually made in a week, thanks to the $100 bill she had angrily stuffed into her pocket, and threw on her coat. She exited through the back alley, the heavy steel door clanging shut behind her. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog. The alley was dimly lit, smelling of wet asphalt and old garbage. She adjusted her purse on her shoulder, reaching for her keys. Voices drifted from around the corner of the building. Near the dumpster. "It is done," a deep voice said. Rough, unforgiving. "Are you sure?" another voice asked. "Messy, but handled. He won't be talking to the feds." Mara froze. She recognized the voices. They were the men from the VIP booth. Luca's men. She took a step back, her sneaker squeaking on the wet pavement. Then she saw them. 2 men standing by a black SUV. One of them was wiping something off the sleeve of his jacket with a rag. Under the yellow glow of the street lamp, the substance was dark and unmistakable. Blood. Panic seized her. She had seen too much. She turned to retreat back into the club, but the door was locked from the inside. Before she could decide whether to run or hide, the sound of an engine roaring to life echoed from the street. A sedan with no headlights screeched around the corner, tires smoking against the asphalt. "Down!" The shout came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Mara turned, confused. Just as the window of the speeding sedan rolled down, the muzzle flash was the first thing she saw. Bright, blinding bursts of light in the darkness. Then the sound caught up. A deafening crack, crack, crack of automatic gunfire. She stood frozen, her mind unable to process the violence speeding toward her. A hard arm slammed around her waist. She was yanked off her feet with terrifying force. The world spun. She hit the wet ground hard, the breath knocked out of her, and immediately a heavy weight covered her. Luca. He was on top of her, pressing her into the grime of the alley floor behind the metal dumpster. His body was a solid wall of heat and muscle, shielding her completely. He smelled of gunpowder and expensive cologne. Bullets chewed up the brick wall inches above their heads, sending showers of red dust and concrete shards raining down on them. The sound was deafening, ringing in her ears like a bell. "Stay down," Luca growled into her ear, his hand cupping the back of her head, forcing her face into his shoulder. The sedan sped past, the gunfire stopping as abruptly as it had begun. The squeal of tires faded into the distance. Silence rushed back into the alley, broken only by the ragged sound of Mara's breathing and the steady, powerful thud of Luca's heart against her chest. She lay there, trembling, the cold damp of the ground seeping into her clothes, pinned beneath the most dangerous man in the city. She looked up, her eyes wide with terror, and met his gaze. He wasn't looking at the shooters. He was looking down at her, his face grim, his jaw set in stone. In that moment, with the smell of smoke in the air and his weight pressing her into the earth, Mara realized the terrifying truth. The office job, the nagging mother, the clingy ex, those were problems of a normal life. That life was gone. She was not just a bartender anymore. She was a witness. She was a target. And she was currently trapped in the arms of the only man who could keep her alive. The simple days of just refusing to cook or clean were over. Now, she just had to survive. Sirens began to wail in the distance, a mournful, rising dissonance that cut through the humid night air. The sound seemed to snap the world back into motion. Behind the dumpster in the alleyway, Luca Moretti pushed himself up, his weight lifting off Mara like a heavy blanket being drawn back. He did not scramble or panic. He moved with a fluid, terrifying efficiency, rising to a crouch and scanning the darkness where the sedan had disappeared. Mara lay on the wet pavement for a second longer. The breath seized in her lungs. The rain had plastered her hair to her forehead, and her uniform smelled of damp trash and the metallic tang of gun smoke. She scrambled to her feet, her knees knocking together, adrenaline flooding her system with a cold, shaking energy. "Get up," Luca commanded. Not unkindly, but with an urgency that brokered no argument. He turned to her, his dark eyes sweeping over her form in the dim amber light of the street lamp. His suit jacket was ruined, smeared with alley grime, but he looked entirely unbothered by it. His focus was absolute. He reached out, his large hands gripping her shoulders, steadying her when she swayed. "Are you hit?" he asked, his voice low and rough. "No, I think... No," Mara stammered, checking her arms. She felt numb, disjointed, as if she were watching herself from 10 feet away. Luca's expression tightened. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, and reached up. His thumb, calloused and warm, brushed against her cheekbone. The contact was startlingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence that had just erupted around them. Mara flinched, not from pain, but from the sudden intimacy of the touch. "You are bleeding," he murmured. She touched her face, her fingers coming away with a small smear of red, a piece of brick, shattered by a bullet. Must have grazed her. It was a superficial cut, but the reality of it, the fact that a bullet had struck inches from her head, made the air rush out of her lungs. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the beat she could feel radiating from him. For a fleeting second, she leaned into his hand, her body seeking the heat and solidity he offered. He felt like a fortress. He felt like the only thing in the world that could not be knocked down. Then the sirens grew louder, and the spell broke. "We need to go," Luca said, his hand dropping from her face to grip her elbow. "My men will handle the cars. You are coming with me. I can take a cab," Mara argued instinctively, though her voice lacked its usual fire. "I just need to go home." "Do not be stupid," Luca said, steering her toward a sleek black car that had pulled up to the alley entrance, driven by one of the stone-faced men from the club. "You are a witness to an attempted hit on a crime boss. You think a cab is safe? Get in the car." "Mara, it was not a request. It was an order, delivered with the casual authority of a man who was used to the world bending to his will." Mara wanted to fight him. She wanted to tell him she did not take orders, that she did not need his protection, that she was Mara Ellis, and she handled her own problems, but her hands were shaking so badly she could not make a fist. She slid into the back seat. The leather was soft and smelled of expensive polish. Luca slid in beside her, the heavy door thudding shut and sealing them in a vacuum of silence. The chaos of the alley, the sirens, the shouting bouncers, the rain was instantly muted. "Drive," Luca told the driver, as the car pulled away, merging seamlessly into the late-night traffic of Graybridge. Mara huddled against the door, trying to put as much space between herself and Luca as possible. But the back seat was intimate, and his presence filled the space. He was checking his phone, typing a message with rapid, precise movements, but she felt his awareness of her like a physical weight. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the shivering. It wasn't the cold, it was the crash after the adrenaline spike. "You are safe now," Luca said quietly, without looking up from his phone. Mara let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a gasp. "Safe? A minute ago, people were shooting machine guns at us. That is your version of safe?" "It is my version of Tuesday," he replied, slipping the phone into his pocket and turning to face her. His expression was unreadable, the shadows from the passing streetlights slicing across his sharp features. "I apologize you got caught in the crossfire. That was untidy." "Untidy," she repeated, staring at him incredulously. "You almost got me killed because you are involved in... Whatever this is, I saved you from getting killed," he corrected calmly. "There is a difference." I would not have needed saving if I had not been standing next to you, she shot back, finding a spark of her anger again. It felt better than the fear. Anger was familiar. Anger kept her spine straight. I do not belong in this world. Luca, I scan invoices and pour vodka sodas. I do not do drive-by shootings. You are in it now, he said. The finality of his tone chilled her. She looked out the window, watching the rain-slick streets of her city blur past. They were passing through neighborhoods she knew, past the grocery store where she bought discount pasta, past the bus stop she stood at every morning, but it all looked different from the inside of a bulletproof luxury car. It looked fragile. When they pulled up to her apartment building, a brick walk-up in a neighborhood that was trying to be trendy but was mostly just tired, Luca signaled the driver to wait. I can walk up myself, Mara said, reaching for the handle. I will see you to your door, Luca said, opening his own door before she could protest. He walked her through the lobby with its flickering fluorescent light and up the 3 flights of stairs. The hallway to her apartment was narrow and smelled faintly of someone's burnt popcorn. Luca seemed too big for the space. His broad shoulders nearly brushed the walls, and his tailored suit looked jarring against the peeling paint. At her door, Mara fumbled with her keys. Her fingers were still clumsy, the metal refusing to slide into the lock. Here, Luca said softly. He reached over, his hand covering hers. His skin was warm, his grip steadying. He took the key from her, his chest brushing against her shoulder as he leaned in to unlock the door. Mara stopped breathing. He was standing too close. In the dim, quiet hallway. The air between them suddenly thickened, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the man standing inches away. The lock clicked. Luca straightened, but he did not step back. He turned to face her, trapping her between his body and the doorframe. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and heavy, dropping to her lips before dragging back up to her gaze. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Mara felt a pull, magnetic and undeniable, urging her to lean forward, to close the scant distance between them. She wanted to know if he tasted like the danger he radiated. She wanted to know if the hands that had shielded her from bullets could be soft in other ways. Panic flared in her chest, not fear of him, but fear of herself. This was a trap, a beautiful, dangerous trap. She cleared her throat, forcing a jagged smile. Well, she said, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet hall. Thanks for the ride, and for, not letting me die behind a dumpster. I will tip you extra next time. The tension broke. Luca blinked, a flicker of amusement returning to his eyes. He stepped back, giving her room to breathe. Get some sleep. Mara, he said, his voice dropping to that low register that made her toes curl. Lock the door behind you. She slipped inside and through the deadbolt, leaning her back against the wood, listening to his heavy footsteps retreat down the hall. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. The next morning, the city of Graybridge seemed determined to pretend nothing had happened. Mara sat in the break room of the logistics company, staring at the local newspaper. Buried on page 4 was a small paragraph. Police responded to reports of gunfire downtown early this morning. Authorities suspect gang-related activity. No injuries reported. No injuries. No mention of the Onyx Room. No mention of the Moretti name. It was terrifying. It meant Luca's reach extended into the newsrooms and the police precincts. He could erase violence as easily as he could order it. Across town, in the penthouse office of a glass and steel skyscraper that housed Moretti Imports, the mood was far less quiet. Luca stood by the window, looking out over the city he practically owned. Behind him, 2 men sat in leather armchairs. One was Marco, his consigliere, a man with graying hair and a mind like a spreadsheet. The other was Dante, Luca's younger brother, who wore his aggression like a second skin. She is a liability. Luca, Dante said, tossing a file onto the coffee table. She saw the shooters. She saw our guys cleaning up. If the feds get to her, they will squeeze her. She's a bartender, for Christ's sake. She will crack in 5 minutes. She won't crack, Luca said, not turning around. You do not know that, Marco added, his voice reasonable and calm. Dante is right to be concerned. The Navarro crew is getting bold. If they know she was with you, they might target her just to send a message. We should encourage her to leave town." "No," Lucas said. The single word was sharp, ending the debate. Dante stood up, pacing. "Why? Since when do we care about civilian witnesses? Unless—" Dante paused, a smirk touching his lips. "Unless the boss has a soft spot. I heard she has a mouth on her. She stays off limits," Lucas said, turning finally to face them. His expression was cold, the kind of look that reminded everyone in the room exactly who was in charge. "We do not touch her. And we do not let Navarro touch her. Put a tail on her. Passive surveillance. I want to know if anyone approaches her." Dante threw up his hands. "You are playing a dangerous game." "Brother, I am handling it," Lucas said. "Get out." Mara's day was a blur of gray cubicles and mindless data entry. She could not focus. Every time a car backfired on the street below, she jumped, her heart racing. She kept replaying the moment in the alley, the weight of Luca's body, the smell of him, the way he had looked at her in the hallway, as if he wanted to devour her. She told herself he was a criminal, a monster, a man who solved problems with guns and money. He represented everything she hated: control, violence, the patriarchal demand for obedience. But beneath the fear, there was a treacherous current of something else: safety. For those few seconds behind the dumpster, she had felt completely, utterly safe. No one could hurt her while he was there. For a woman who had spent her life fighting her own battles, exhausted and alone, that feeling was a drug she hadn't known she craved. By 5 o'clock, she was practically running out of the office, desperate for a change of scenery. She had picked up a shift at the Roasted Bean, a coffee shop near the university, covering for a friend who was sick. It was her third job, a sporadic gig she kept just to pay down the interest on her student loans. The coffee shop was bright, smelling of ground beans and vanilla syrup, a safe, normal place. Mara tied on her green apron and tried to lose herself in the rhythm of pulling espresso shots and foaming milk. At 6:30, the bell above the door chimed. Mara did not look up immediately. "What can I get for you?" she asked, wiping down the steam wand. "Black coffee? No sugar?" The voice stopped her hands mid-motion. She looked up. Luca Moretti was standing at the counter. He looked jarringly out of place among the students with their laptops and the soccer moms with their strollers. He was dressed casually today, in dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater that fit him perfectly, but he still carried that air of command. He looked like a wolf who had wandered into a petting zoo. He was leaning against the counter, watching her with that faint, maddening amusement. "You follow me now?" Mara asked, trying to keep her voice steady as she grabbed a cup. "I like coffee," Luca said simply, "and I heard the barista here has a terrible attitude. I wanted to see for myself." Mara fought a smile and lost. She scrawled his name on the cup, writing The Godfather instead of Luca, and slammed it down next to the register. "That will be $3.50. And I do not have an attitude. I have boundaries." Luca chuckled, placing a $5 bill on the counter. "Keep the change. I do not want your charity," Mara said, pushing the bill back toward him. "It is a tip, Mara. Take it." He picked up his coffee, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second. The spark was immediate, traveling up her arm like a live wire. "Break time?" he asked, tilting his head toward the door. "I am working," she said. 5 minutes, Luca countered, "or I will stand here and glare at every customer who tries to order until you are free." Mara looked at the line forming behind him. She looked at his determined face. She untied her apron. 5 minutes, she warned. "But if my manager yells at me—" "You are explaining it to him. I think I can handle your manager," Luca said dryly. They stepped outside into the cool evening air. The street was quiet, lined with oak trees and brick storefronts. It felt worlds away from the dark alley of the night before, but the tension between them was just as thick. Luca led her a few steps away from the shop entrance, into the privacy of a recessed doorway. His demeanor shifted instantly. The playful banter vanished, replaced by a serious intensity. "Have you seen anything unusual today?" he asked. "Cars following you? Hang-up calls?" "No," Mara said, crossing her arms against the chill. I have seen spreadsheets and coffee beans. Luca, what are you doing here? You cannot just show up at my jobs. I told you, he said, his voice dropping. You are a loose end. There are people who might think you know more than you do. So I am a target, she stated flatly. Possibly, and you are here to... What? Scare me? I am here to offer you a solution, Luca said. He stepped closer, blocking the wind, blocking the view of the street. Stay where I can see you. I have a secure apartment. You can stay there for a few days until things calm down. Mara bristled. The offer hit all her trigger points. It sounded like a cage. It sounded like her mother telling her to find a husband to take care of her. I am not going to be kept. Luca, she said, her voice rising, I have rent to pay. I have a life. I am not going to hide in some tower because you have enemies. I don't need a keeper. I am not trying to keep you, he said, frustration edging into his tone. I am trying to keep you alive. You are stubborn. Mara, it is going to get you hurt. I would rather be stubborn than owned, she snapped. She turned to go back inside, but he moved faster than she expected. He didn't grab her. He just stepped into her path and, stopping her with his presence, he looked down at her, his expression softening in a way that terrified her more than his anger. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline, his skin rough against her softness. The world seemed to fade away, the traffic noise, the coffee shop music, it all dulled into a background hum. There was only the heat of his hand and the depth of his eyes. I have not stopped thinking about it. He confessed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. Thinking about what? She whispered, her breath hitching. Your fire, he said. You stood up to me in that club. You stood up to gunmen in an alley. You are fighting me now. His thumb traced the line of her lower lip. I have never met a woman who fights me like you do, he murmured. Mara felt her resolve cracking like ice under hot water. Her arguments about independence, about cooking and cleaning, about morality, they all felt distant and blurry. Her hand moved without her permission, coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel the solid muscle beneath the soft cashmere, the steady, heavy beat of his heart. She should push him away. She knew she should. Instead, she tilted her head back. Luca leaned in. It was not a sudden move. It was a slow, inevitable gravitation. When his lips touched hers, it was tentative at first, a question asked in the silence of the street. Mara gasped softly, her lips parting, and the kiss deepened instantly. It was searing. It tasted of coffee and danger and pent-up longing. Luca's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Lifting her slightly off her feet, Mara gripped the front of his sweater, bunching the expensive fabric in her fists. It wasn't a gentle kiss anymore. It was a collision. It was the release of 24 hours of fear and adrenaline, channeled into a desperate, heated connection. For a moment, Mara forgot everything. She forgot her name, her job, her rules. She just felt him. Then reality came crashing back. She was kissing a Mafia boss outside her minimum wage job. She was doing exactly what every cautionary tale warned against. She was losing herself. She broke away, gasping for air, pushing against his chest. No, she said, and her voice trembling. No, Mara, Luca started, reaching for her, his eyes dark and blown wide. Do not, she said, backing away, her hand covering her mouth. You are manipulating me. You are using this chemistry to get me to do what you want, to get me into your car, into your house. I'm not manipulating you, Luca said, his voice rough. That was real. It can't be real, she said, tears pricking her eyes, because you are everything I don't want. You are control, Luca, and I won't be controlled. She turned and ran back into the coffee shop, the bell chiming cheerfully above her head, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk. The rest of the night was a nightmare. Mara finished her shift with shaking hands, avoiding looking out the window. When she finally clocked out and took the bus home, Every shadow looked like a gunman. She reached her apartment building at 11 o'clock. The street was empty. As she unlocked the front door of her building, a black sedan rolled slowly down the street. It slowed as it passed her. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but she felt the gaze from within. It wasn't Luca's car. It was older, battered, menacing. She practically sprinted up the stairs to her apartment, locking all 3 locks the moment she was inside. She was just pouring herself a glass of water when her phone rang. The screen displayed no caller ID. "Hello?" she answered, her voice trembling. "Keep your mouth shut, bitch," a distorted voice rasped on the other end. "Or next time, they won't miss." The line went dead. Mara dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. She paced the small kitchen, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She grabbed the landline and dialed 911. "What is your emergency? I just got a death threat," Mara said, "and I witnessed a shooting last night. I think they are following me." "What is your name?" "Ma'am?" "Mara Ellis." The shooting was at the Onyx Room. There was a pause on the line, a shuffling of papers. "Ma'am, we have no active investigation regarding a shooting at that location. And a prank call isn't grounds for dispatching a unit. If you see someone on your property, call us back." But Mara started. But the dispatcher had already disconnected. She stood in the center of her kitchen, the silence of the apartment pressing in on her. The police would not help. They were either bought or blind. Her family would just tell her she deserved it for working at a club. She was completely, terrifyingly alone. She looked at her cell phone lying on the floor. She remembered Luca's voice. "Everyone needs protection, sweetheart." She remembered the feeling of his body shielding hers in the alley, the way he had looked at her outside the coffee shop, not as a victim, but as someone fiery and worth saving. With shaking hands, she picked up the phone. She scrolled through her recent calls until she found the number he had texted her from the night before. She hovered her thumb over the call button. Calling him meant admitting she couldn't handle this. It meant stepping into his world. It meant crossing a line she might never be able to uncross. But then the image of the black car creeping past her building flashed in her mind. She closed her eyes and pressed the button. The scratch marks on the lock were the first thing Mara noticed. They were jagged, silver scars against the brass, a clumsy attempt to force the mechanism that had clearly failed but left a message nonetheless. But it was the object resting on her doormat that turned her blood to ice. It was a kitchen knife, a cheap, serrated steak knife, the kind you could buy at any dollar store. But the intent was clear. It had been driven point first into the rubber mat, standing upright like a tombstone. Mara stood in the hallway, her grocery bag slipping from her numb fingers to hit the floor with a heavy thud. The jar of pasta sauce inside shattered, red liquid seeping out across the linoleum like a gruesome prophecy. She backed away, her breath coming in shallow, terrified gasps. The silence of the apartment building, usually annoying, now felt predatory. She did not call the police this time. She knew better. With trembling hands, she pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed the number she had sworn she wouldn't use again. He picked up on the first ring. "Where are you?" Luca's voice was sharp. "Immediate." "My apartment," Mara whispered. "There is a knife on my mat." "Do not go inside," Luca ordered, the sound of a car engine roaring to life in the background. "Go downstairs. Wait in the lobby. Do not speak to anyone. I am 3 minutes away." Those 3 minutes stretched into an eternity. When the black SUV screeched to a halt in front of the building, Mara nearly collapsed with relief. Luca was out of the car before it had fully stopped, his movement a blur of controlled violence. He stormed into the lobby, his eyes scanning every corner before landing on her. He did not hug her. He looked furious. "Why did you wait?" he demanded, gripping her shoulders, his eyes searching her face for injuries. "You saw the lock scratches yesterday, didn't you?" "I thought it was just the neighbors," she stammered. "I didn't want to be paranoid. Paranoia keeps you breathing." Luca snapped. He signaled to 2 of his men, who were already heading up the stairs with guns drawn. "Pack a bag," Luca said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You are done here. I can't just leave," Mara protested weakly. though the fight had largely drained out of her. My lease, my job. Your lease is the least of your problems, and your job can wait. Unless you want the next knife to be in your chest? The image of the blade sticking out of the mat flashed in her mind. Mara closed her mouth and nodded. The penthouse was less a home and more a fortress in the sky. Located at the very top of the Moretti Imports Tower, it was a sprawling expanse of glass, polished concrete, and black leather. It was stunning, offering a 360-degree view of Graybridge, but it felt cold. It felt like a museum where nothing was meant to be touched. Luca carried her duffel bag inside, setting it down on the marble floor of the foyer. The guest suite is down the hall to the right, he said, loosening his tie. It has an ensuite bathroom. The security code for the elevator is changed daily, but you won't need it because you are not leaving. Mara walked further into the room, her sneakers squeaking on the pristine floor. She stopped at the kitchen. It was enormous, featuring stainless steel appliances that looked like they had never been used, a sub-zero fridge, and an island the size of a small car. Nice kitchen, she said, her voice echoing in the vast space. Just so we are clear, I'm never using it. Luca paused, looking at her. The tension in his shoulders seemed to drop an inch. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I remember. He said, "You don't cook or clean." "I mean it," Mara said, trying to reclaim a shred of her agency. "I am not making you an omelet. I am not wiping down these counters. If I am a prisoner here, I am going to be a terrible one. You are not a prisoner. Mara, you are a guest who is currently being hunted." He walked over to the kitchen island and opened a drawer, revealing a stash of takeout menus from the city's most expensive restaurants. "I have chefs on call," he said. "I have a cleaning service that comes in every morning at 10. I do not need you to scrub floors or roast chickens." He looked at her then, the amusement fading into a stark, heavy seriousness. "I just need you to stay alive." The raw honesty in his voice tightened Mara's chest. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. It would have been easier if he were just a tyrant. It was the moments of desperate protectiveness that made her walls crumble. The first few days were a strange exercise in coexistence. Mara, who was used to rushing from job to job, suddenly found herself with nothing but time. She could not leave the building. Security guards stood outside the elevator doors 24 hours a day. She adjusted to the rhythm of Luca's life. He was gone early and back late, often smelling of cigar smoke and exhaustion when he was home. He was usually on the phone, pacing the length of the living room, speaking in rapid-fire Italian or low, dangerous English. Mara stopped wearing her stiff jeans and office clothes. She raided the guest closet and found a stack of brand-new, high-quality T-shirts that Luca must have kept for emergencies. She wore them like dresses, wandering the penthouse barefoot, her hair in a messy bun. She watched him. She saw things the tabloids and the FBI files probably missed. She saw the way he rubbed his temples when he thought she wasn't looking. She saw the way he stared out the window at the city, not like a king surveying his kingdom, but like a man trapped in a cage of his own making. One evening, a summer storm rolled over Graybridge. Thunder rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows, and rain lashed against the glass in sheets. The power grid in the city flickered, plunging the penthouse into darkness for a few seconds before the backup generators kicked in with a low hum. Mara found Luca out on the balcony. The overhang protected him from the rain, but the wind whipped his white dress shirt against his torso. He was gripping the railing, his knuckles white. "You should come inside," Mara called out, sliding the glass door open. "It is freezing out here." And he didn't turn around. "My father used to love storms," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. He said it was the only time the world was as loud as his head. Mara stepped onto the balcony, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. She knew about Giovanni Moretti. Everyone did. He had been a brute, a man who ruled with fear until his own heart gave out. He was a hard man, wasn't he? She asked cautiously. "He was a monster," Luca corrected flatly. "He taught me that power is the only thing that matters, that people are assets, that women are possessions, furniture, something to be kept shiny and quiet. He turned to look at her then. The lighting from the city below cast deep shadows on his face, making him look older, wearier. I grew up watching the women in my family fade away, Luca said. They cooked, they cleaned. They looked the other way when their husbands came home with blood on their hands. They were ghosts in their own houses. He took a step toward her, his eyes intense. I do not want that for you. Mara, I never wanted to drag you into this. I don't know how to keep you safe without locking you up, and I hate that I am doing exactly what I swore I wouldn't do. Mara saw his hand resting on the railing. It was shaking. Just a slight tremor, a crack in the granite facade of the dawn. She didn't think. She just moved. She reached out and placed her hand over his. Her skin was pale against his olive tone, her fingers small but firm. She pressed down, grounding him. You are not him, she said softly. I am a criminal. Mara, I hurt people. You are protecting me, she countered. You gave me a room. You respected my rules. You haven't asked me for anything. She stepped closer, until she was standing inside his personal space. Come inside, Luca. He let her lead him back into the living room. The storm raged outside, but inside, it was quiet. They sat on the massive leather sofa. Luca sat hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, carrying the weight of the empire on his shoulders. Mara moved behind him. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then placed her hands on his shoulders. The muscles were rock hard, knotted with tension. She began to knead the stiffness, her thumbs working into the cords of his neck. Luca flinched at first, surprised by the touch, but then he let out a long, ragged exhale. He leaned back, his head falling against her stomach as she stood behind the couch. That feels good, he murmured, his eyes closing. You carry too much, Mara whispered. Someone has to... Not tonight, she said. She worked on his shoulders for a long time, the rhythmic motion lulling them both into a trance. The air in the room changed. It shifted from comforting to charged. The heat of his body seeped into her palms. The sound of his breathing deepened, syncing with hers. When she finally stopped, her hands resting lightly on his chest, he didn't move away. He reached up, covering her hands with his own, interlacing their fingers. Thank you, he said. Mara couldn't sleep that night. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy with unspoken words. At 2 a.m, she gave up on tossing and turning and padded out to the kitchen for a glass of water. She wasn't alone. Luca was leaning against the quartz island, staring into a tumbler of whiskey. He had discarded his jacket and tie. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing the strong, corded muscles of his forearms. He looked up as she entered. In the dim light of the under-cabinet LEDs, his eyes were pools of obsidian. Couldn't sleep, he asked, his voice rough with fatigue and something else, something raw. No, Mara said. She was wearing one of his T-shirts again. It hung off one shoulder, exposing the curve of her collarbone. She saw his gaze drop to the skin, lingering there before dragging back up to her face. Me neither, he admitted. Mara walked around the island. She didn't get water. She stopped in front of him. The distance between them was negligible. Why are we dancing around this? Luca? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because, he said, setting the glass down. Once we cross this line, Mara, there is no going back. I won't let you go. And you deserve better than a life of looking over your shoulder. I am already looking over my shoulder, she said, and I am tired of being scared. I want to feel something else. Luca watched her, his restraint warring with his desire. He reached out, his knuckles brushing the line of her jaw, a feather-light touch that sent shivers racing down her spine. I warned you, he murmured. I know. I don't cook or clean, she whispered, a callback to their first fight, but this time it was a surrender, not a challenge. I know, he replied, his voice a low growl. She reached up, cupping his face between her hands. The stubble on his jaw was rough against her palms. He lowered his head, giving her one last second to pull away. When she didn't, he closed the gap. The kiss was not explosive. It was slow. It was unhurried. It was the taste of whiskey and longing, a deep, devastating slide of lips that felt like coming home. Luca's arms went around her, pulling her into him, not with force, but with a desperate need to have her as close as physics would allow. Mara melted into him. The fear of the last few days, the confusion, the anger, it all dissolved into the heat of his body. She gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, opening for him, letting him taste the sigh that escaped her throat. He lifted her, setting her on the edge of the island, stepping between her legs to get closer. His hands roamed over her back, her waist, treating her body with a reverence that made her ache. Bedroom. He breathed against her neck. Yes. They stumbled down the hall, lips never breaking contact for long, in the sanctuary of his bedroom. Stripped of the titles of boss and witness, they were just a man and a woman who had found the only safe place in a burning world. There was no rush. They moved with the slow, deliberate intensity of two people who knew they had the rest of their lives to memorize each other. When they finally tangled together on the sheets, it wasn't just about friction or release, it was an anchoring. It was Mara claiming him as much as he claimed her. Morning sunlight hit the penthouse with the subtlety of a spotlight. Mara woke up, stretching her arm across the bed, seeking the warmth she had fallen asleep against. The sheets were cold. She sat up, blinking against the glare. The bedroom door was open. She could hear voices coming from the living room. She wrapped the sheet around herself and crept to the door, a smile touching her lips as she remembered the night, the way he had held her, the way he had whispered her name. It is done. Luca's voice drifted down the hall. It was not the voice of the lover from the night before. It was the voice of the capo, cold, detached, steel. Are you sure? Another voice asked. Dante. Yes, they found the rat. He won't be talking to anyone ever again. Did you have him removed? I had him dealt with. Dante. Permanently. Make sure the body isn't found for a week. I want the message to sink in slowly. Mara froze. The blood drained from her face. He had ordered a murder. While she slept in his bed, wrapped in the scent of his skin, he had woken up, put on a suit, and ordered the execution of a human being. She backed away from the door, retreating into the bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, her stomach churning. She felt like a hypocrite. She had let herself forget who he was. She had let the handsome face and the gentle hands mask the reality of his world. Her mind flashed back to her childhood. She remembered her mother, on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor of a wealthy doctor's house, grateful for the crumbs. She remembered her father screaming that she owed him respect, that his word was law. Was this any different? Was she just trading domestic servitude for moral servitude? Was she becoming the woman who looked the other way, just like Luca had feared? The warmth of the night before turned to ash in her mouth. She dressed quickly in the t-shirt and sweatpants, unable to face her own reflection in the mirror. When she walked into the living room, Luca was off the phone. He was standing with Dante and Marco. He turned when he saw her. His face softened instantly. That special look he reserved only for her returning. "Good morning," he said, moving to greet her. Mara stayed where she was, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. "Good morning," she said, her voice stiff. Luca stopped, sensing the shift immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly. Marco. The consigliere did not bother to hide his disdain. He looked at Mara with open hostility. "We are in the middle of a meeting," Marco said, snapping his briefcase shut. "This is exactly what I was talking about. Luca, you are distracted. Watch your tone." "Marco," Luca warned, his eyes never leaving Mara's face. "I am speaking the truth," Marco argued, his voice rising. "She is a civilian. She is a weakness. Navarro knows she is here. You are risking the entire organization, risking your own brother for a girl who pours drinks. She's going to get us all killed." "I am standing right here," Mara said. She stepped forward, anger overriding her fear and her guilt. She wasn't going to be talked about like she was a piece of luggage. "I am not a distraction, Marco, and I am not a weakness. I am the reason you know Navarro is making a move. If I hadn't seen those men in the alley, you would be dead right now." Marco sneered. "You are a liability. You should be on a plane to nowhere. Not sleeping in the boss's bed? That is enough. Luca's voice cracked through the room like a whip. He turned on Marco, his expression murderous. You will treat her with respect, Luca said, his voice low and deadly quiet. She is not a liability. She's with me. And anyone who has a problem with that has a problem with me. Do I make myself clear? The room went silent. Dante looked at the floor. Marco's jaw tightened, his face turning a blotchy red. Crystal clear, boss. Marco spat out. Get out, Luca said, both of you. Marco and Dante gathered their things and left, the heavy front door slamming shut behind them with a finality that echoed in the glass room. Luca turned to Mara. He looked tired again. He reached out to touch her arm, but Mara took a small step back. She saw the hurt flash in his eyes, but she couldn't help it. She could still hear his voice on the phone. Make sure the body isn't found. I heard you, she whispered. On the phone. Luca's hand dropped to his side. He didn't insult her intelligence by pretending he didn't know what she meant. It is the life. Mara, he said simply. I know, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know if I can live it. She turned and walked back toward the bedroom, leaving him standing alone in the center of his empire, the silence between them louder than any storm. The file hit the mahogany desk with a heavy, final thud. Inside the folder were photographs, surveillance logs, and a transcribed conversation that made Luca Moretti's blood run cold. The Navarro Crew, a rival organization that had been clawing at the edges of Moretti territory for years, had finally found their leverage. They weren't targeting his shipments. They weren't targeting his captains. They were talking about the girl. He's got a favorite toy. One of the transcripts read, "Pretty thing. Kept high up in the tower. We take her. He breaks. We get the port routes. Or we send her back in pieces." Luca stood by the window of his study, staring out at the Gray Bridge skyline. The city looked peaceful from 50 floors up, a grid of amber lights and moving traffic, but he knew the rot that lived in the gutters. He had brought that rot into his own home. He turned and walked out of the study, finding Mara in the living room. She was curled up on the sofa with a book, wearing one of his sweaters, looking deceptively domestic, looking at her. His chest tightened with a fierce, terrifying possessiveness. "You are not leaving the penthouse," Luca said. The words came out sharper than he intended, clipped and cold. Mara looked up, marking her page. "Hello to you, too." "What happened?" "Security protocols are changing," Luca stated, not stopping to sit down. He paced the length of the room, his energy restless. No more trips to the lobby, no more standing on the balcony, and definitely no going back to work. Mara closed the book. "We talked about this. Luca, I called my manager. I told him I had a family emergency, but I can't just vanish forever. I have friends. I have bills. I am handling your bills," Luca said dismissively, "and your friends will have to wait." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Mara stood up, the book sliding to the floor. She crossed the room to intercept him, forcing him to stop pacing. "I am not a prisoner. Luca, you asked me to stay here for a few days. It has been a week. I am climbing the walls. I need fresh air. I need to feel like a human being, not a pet you keep on a shelf." "You are not a pet," Luca snapped, his control fraying. "You are a target. Navarro knows you are here. They are watching the building. If you step 1 foot on the pavement down there, they will grab you, and I will have to burn this entire city to the ground to get you back." "Then let me go," Mara shouted, her frustration boiling over. "If I am such a liability, if I am in so much danger, let me leave. I will move to another state. I will change my name. But I can't stay here, locked in this glass box, waiting for men with guns to kick down the door. You think you can just leave?" Luca stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think they won't find you in Ohio? In Florida? They will use you to get to me. Mara, you are stuck in this. Because of you," she accused, poking him in the chest hard enough to hurt. "Because you couldn't leave me alone in that alley. Because I wanted you alive," he roared back. The silence that followed was deafening. They stood inches apart, chests heaving, the air between them crackling with anger and fear. Mara stepped back first, her expression closing off. "I hate this," she said quietly. I hate your world, and I hate that you are making me a part of it." She turned and walked into the guest room, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Lucas stared at the wood, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, knowing that every lock he turned to keep her safe was just another bar in the cage he had built around her. The days that followed were a study in misery. The warmth that had bloomed between them during the storm evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy tension. Mara stopped seeking him out. She stayed in the guest room, reading the same books over and over, or watching TV with the volume turned low. When they did cross paths in the kitchen or the hallway, the conversations were brief and functional. "Do you need anything?" "No." "Good." Luca threw himself into the war. He left the penthouse before sunrise and returned long after Mara had gone to bed. He was dismantling Navarro's operations piece by piece, burning warehouses and seizing assets, trying to make the cost of coming after him too high to pay. But the violence had a cost for him, too. One night, he came home at 3 a.m. Mara was in the kitchen drinking a glass of water. She froze when he walked in. He looked like a wreck. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt stained with dirt and dried blood. His knuckles were raw and split, and a dark bruise was blooming along his jawline. Mara's instinct was to go to him. Her hands twitched, wanting to reach for the first aid kit, wanting to soothe the hurts like she had that night on the sofa. But she held herself back. She looked at the violence painted on his skin, and she remembered the phone call. "Make sure the body isn't found." "Rough night?" she asked, her voice devoid of warmth. "Business." Luca grunted, walking past her to the liquor cabinet. He poured a drink with a shaking hand. "Is this what it is going to be like?" Mara asked to his back. "You come home bleeding, and I pretend I don't know why? Go to bed, Mara." She looked at his broad back, seeing the tension in his muscles, the exhaustion in his posture. She hated him for doing this to her. She hated him for making her care about a man who solved problems with his fists. "Don't get blood on the floor," she said coldly. "The cleaners just came." She left him there, alone with his whiskey and his ghosts. 2 days later, Mara reached her breaking point. She needed toothpaste. It was a stupid, trivial thing. But it became the focal point of her rebellion. She told the security team she needed to go to the pharmacy. They refused. She screamed until the head of the detail, a man named Russo, finally compromised. They would drive her to a high-end grocery store 3 blocks away. They would sweep the building. They would stand at the ends of the aisles. It was a small victory, but it felt like a prison break. The grocery store was bright, sterile, and painfully normal. Mara wandered the aisles, smelling the artificial scent of detergent and the earthy smell of produce. It felt like a different planet compared to the suffocating luxury of the penthouse. Russo and another guard were posted at the ends of the aisle, watching the perimeter. Mara pretended to be interested in different brands of cereal, just enjoying the illusion of choice. She turned the corner into the baking aisle. Momentarily out of Russo's direct line of sight, a woman in a beige trench coat was standing in front of the flour, studying a bag. As Mara passed, the woman spoke without looking up. "You are hard to get to." "Miss Ellis." Mara froze. She looked at the woman. She was in her 30s, with sharp features and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and found it wanting. "Who are you?" Mara whispered, glancing back toward where Russo was standing. "Agent Rachel Kincaid, FBI," the woman said, turning to face her. She held up a badge, flashing it quickly before tucking it away. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you here to arrest me?" "I am here to save you," Kincaid said, her voice low and urgent. "We know you are staying at the Moretti penthouse. We know you were at the Onyx room the night of the shooting." "I don't know anything," Mara said, reciting the lines she had practiced in her head 1,000 times. "Don't give me that," Kincaid snapped softly. "You are a smart girl. Mara, you have 2 degrees and a clean record. What are you doing playing house with a monster like Luca Moretti?" "He's protecting me," Mara said, though the words tasted like ash. "He is using you," Kincaid corrected. "And right now, he is the only reason you are a target. Navarro wants you because you are Moretti's weakness. But the Bureau? We just want Moretti. Kincaid stepped closer, her gaze intense. We are building a RICO case. Mara. It is going to drop soon. When it does, everyone in that penthouse is going down. Accessories, accomplices, girlfriends, unless you help us. Help you how? Tell us what you see. Who comes and goes. What he talks about. Where the money is. You want me to spy on him, Mara said, horror rising in her throat. I want you to choose a side, Kincaid said. You can be a witness for the prosecution, or you can be a defendant sitting next to him in federal court. He is going to prison. Mara? Or he is going to end up in a morgue. Do not let him take you with him. Russo's heavy footsteps echoed from the next aisle. Think about it, Kincaid whispered, slipping a small white card into Mara's hand. You have 24 hours. By the time Russo rounded the corner, Kincaid was just a woman buying flour, and the card was burning a hole in Mara's pocket. Back at the penthouse, the silence was suffocating. Mara sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, the white card sitting on the nightstand like a loaded gun. Agent Rachel Kincaid, Federal Bureau of Investigation? She felt sick, physically ill. She thought about the man who had ordered a murder while she slept. She thought about the violence in the alley. She thought about the families destroyed by the drugs and the weapons that moved through the city. Businesses Luca profited from. The moral choice was obvious. He was a criminal. He belonged in jail. But then she thought about the way his thumb had brushed the cut on her cheek. She thought about the storm and the shaking of his hand and the way he had confessed his own trauma. She thought about how he had shielded her body with his own without a second of hesitation. He was a monster to the world, but he had been nothing but a savior to her. Could she betray him? Could she really be the one to put the handcuffs on him? The sound of the front door opening made her jump. He was home early. She shoved the card into her pocket and walked out to the living room, her heart racing. Luca was standing in the foyer. He wasn't injured today. He looked pristine, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, but his face was a mask of thunder. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to her, stopping a foot away. The air around him felt charged with static. Did you enjoy your trip to the grocery store? He asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I just needed toothpaste, Mara said, her voice trembling slightly. And did you get it? Or were you too busy talking to the feds? Mara's blood went cold. How do you... I have eyes everywhere. Mara, Luca roared, the calm shattering instantly. Did you think I wouldn't know? Russo saw her. We ran the plates. Agent Kincaid, he advanced on her. And for the first time, Mara took a step back in genuine fear. What did you tell her? He demanded. Nothing, I told her nothing. Did she offer you a deal? Luca accused, his eyes wild. Did she tell you she would cut you loose if you gave me up? Yes, Mara shouted back. Finding her footing? Yes. She offered me a deal. She told me I could avoid prison if I stopped protecting you. And? Luca asked, his voice cracking. Are you going to do it? Are you going to sell me out to save yourself? Maybe I should, Mara yelled, tears springing to her eyes. Maybe I should. Luca, because she is right. You are a criminal. You hurt people. You kill people. And you have locked me in this tower and stripped away my entire life. I gave you everything, Luca shouted, grabbing her shoulders. I gave you safety. I gave you loyalty. I would die for you, Mara. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you own me, she cried, shoving at his chest with both hands. It means I am just another thing in your collection. You don't want a partner. Luca, you want a possession. You want someone to stay in your bed and wait for you to come home and wash the blood off your hands. I can't do it. I can't be that woman. She shoved him again, harder this time. I hate you for making me love you, she screamed. The confession hung in the air, raw and bleeding. Luca stared at her, his chest heaving. The anger in his eyes shifted, darkening into something desperate. He grabbed her wrists, stopping her from hitting him again. You love me, he rasped. I wish I didn't. She sobbed. God, I wish I didn't. Luca let out a sound that was half groan, half growl. He pulled her toward him, crashing his mouth onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was fierce, angry, and desperate. It was the taste of betrayal and devotion mixed together. Mara didn't pull away. She kissed him back with the same fury, her hands freeing themselves from his grip to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. They stumbled backward, hitting the wall. Luca's hands were everywhere, gripping her waist, her hips, as if he was trying to memorize the feel of her. It was a kiss that tasted of goodbyes. They broke apart, gasping for air, foreheads resting against each other. Mara was crying, hot tears tracking down her cheeks. "I can't lose myself. Luca," she whispered, her voice broken. "I can't be who you need me to be. I am losing my mind in here." Luca closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. His hands relaxed on her waist, sliding down to her sides before dropping away completely. He stepped back. The distance between them felt like a canyon. He looked at her, at the tears, at the fear, at the love that was tearing her apart. He realized then that Navarro wasn't the biggest threat to her. He was... "You are right," he said hoarsely. His face shuddered, the mask of the dawn sliding back into place. "You are right. Us. It was a mistake. Luca." Mara started, reaching for him. "Don't," he said, backing away. "Go to your room, Mara. Pack your things." "What? Where are you sending me?" "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere I am not." He turned and walked out of the apartment without looking back. Mara cried herself to sleep. When she woke up the next morning, the penthouse was silent. She walked out to the living room. It was empty. There was no smell of coffee, no security guards by the elevator. On the kitchen island, there was a single envelope and a set of keys. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a typed letter and a stack of cash. "Mara. The apartment is in West Graybridge. The lease is in the name of Sarah Miller. It is paid for a year. The job at the bookshop on 4th Street is yours if you want it. The owner owes me a favor. He won't ask questions. Navarro won't look for you there. The feds won't find you. You are a ghost now. Do not contact me. Do not come back to the club. If I see you again, I will not be able to let you go a second time. Be safe. Be free. Don't cook for anyone who doesn't deserve it." There was no love, just the initial. Mara stared at the paper until the words blurred. He was gone. He had set her free, just like she asked. She grabbed the bag she hadn't unpacked in weeks. She took the keys. She left the cash. She walked out of the penthouse, the elevator ride down feeling like a descent into a world that was suddenly too big and too empty. The Book Nook was a small, dusty cafe with mismatched furniture and the smell of old paper. It was exactly the kind of place Mara would have loved in her old life. She worked behind the counter, wearing an apron that smelled of cinnamon. Her name tag said Sarah. It had been 3 weeks. She had a routine again. She woke up in the small, secure apartment Luca had provided. She walked to work. She poured coffee. She went home. She cooked dinner for one. Microwave meals, mostly out of spite. It was safe. It was normal. It was everything she had fought for. And she was miserable. Every time the door chimed, she looked up, hoping to see a tall man in a dark suit with eyes like espresso. Every time a black luxury car drove past the window, her heart stopped in her chest. She read the papers. The gang war was escalating. There were reports of fires at the docks, arrests, bodies found in the river. She scanned every article for his name, terrified she would find it in the obituaries. She was free, but she wasn't whole. One afternoon, she was wiping down a table near the window. A news report was playing on the small TV in the corner. FBI raids Moretti warehouse. The anchor announced, 3 arrests made. No sign of Luca Moretti. Mara gripped the rag, her knuckles white. She missed the danger. She missed the fear. But mostly, she missed the way he made her feel like she was the only burning thing in a cold world. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. Sarah Miller looked tired. She looked lonely. She realized then that independence was a cold comfort when you had left your heart in the hands of the devil. She finished her shift. She walked home. And for the first time in her life, she wished she had someone to cook for. The autumn wind in Graybridge had a bite to it, cutting through the thin cardigan Mara wore as she locked the front door of the Book Nook. It had been 3 weeks since she had become Sarah Miller, 3 weeks of answering to a name that wasn't hers, of sleeping in a bed that felt too empty, and of looking over her shoulder every time a floorboard creaked. The street was quiet. The streetlights hummed with a sickly yellow glow, casting long, stretching shadows against the brickwork of the closed shops. Mara turned the key in the lock, the metal click echoing loudly in the silence. She dropped the keys into her purse, her fingers brushing against the heavy brass key to her old apartment, the one she still kept, a talisman of a life she had been forced to abandon. She turned to leave, tightening her scarf, and stopped dead. 2 men were standing at the mouth of the alley that ran alongside the bookshop. They were not the usual late-night wanderers or college students looking for a shortcut. They were waiting, and they were dressed in leather jackets that cost more than her entire month's salary at the cafe. Mara's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She took a step back toward the glass door, her hand diving into her purse, closing around the brass key, going somewhere. "Miss Ellis?" the taller man asked. His voice was smooth, mocking. He stepped into the light, revealing a face scarred by old violence and eyes that held zero warmth. "My name is Sarah," Mara said, her voice steady despite the terror pooling in her gut. "You have the wrong person," the man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Nice try, sweetheart." But we had a long chat with a busboy from the Onyx room. Kid talked for an hour once we showed him a little incentive. He remembered the boss's favorite toy. The mention of the club and the implied threat made Mara's blood run cold. She didn't wait for them to make the next move. She turned and sprinted toward the main road, hoping to flag down a car, a police cruiser, anything. She made it 10 feet. The second man moved with terrifying speed. He tackled her from the side, slamming her into the brick wall of the alley entrance. The air left her lungs in a painful whoosh. Rough hands grabbed her arms, twisting them behind her back with bruising force. "Let me go!" Mara screamed, kicking out blindly. "Shut her up," the first man ordered, bringing a black van screeching to the curb. A heavy hand clamped over her mouth, tasting of tobacco and grease. They dragged her toward the sliding door of the van. "You really thought you could just leave Luca Moretti?" the man holding her whispered in her ear, his breath hot and rancid. "You really thought he would let you go? Or maybe you thought we would let him keep you?" They tossed her into the back of the van like a sack of flour. Mara landed hard on the metal floor, her shoulder striking the wheel well. The door slammed shut, plunging her into absolute darkness. Panic threatened to swallow her whole. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle lurched forward. "Think," she told herself, biting her lip until she tasted copper. "Don't freeze. Think." She was terrified. But she was not helpless. She was Mara Ellis. She had survived Luca Moretti's world for weeks. She wasn't going to die in a van. She still had her purse clutched in her hand, quietly, moving with agonizing slowness so the men in the front wouldn't hear. She fished out the brass key. She pressed the jagged edge of the key into the plastic paneling of the van's interior wall. Firefly. That was what Luca had called her. A foolish, sentimental nickname he had used once when she was angry and burning with defiance. She scratched the letters into the plastic. Firefly. It was a long shot, a desperate message in a bottle. If Luca's men found the van later, if they found her body, she wanted him to know she hadn't gone quietly. She wanted him to know she was still burning. The van took a sharp left. Mara's body slid across the floor. She closed her eyes and started counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, right turn, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, bump, train tracks. She memorized the rhythm of the drive, building a map in her head, determined to know exactly where they were taking her. The atmosphere in the safe house on the east side of the city was usually one of controlled chaos. Tonight, it was a tomb. Luca stood over a table covered in blueprints and surveillance photos of the Navarro compound. He was mid-sentence, outlining a strike on their supply lines. When the door burst open, it was Dante. His face was pale, stripped of its usual arrogance. "Luca," he said, his voice tight. "What?" Luca snapped, not looking up. I told you I didn't want interruptions. It is the girl, Dante said. Luca went still. The marker in his hand snapped with a sharp crack. He looked up slowly, his eyes devoid of humanity. What did you say? Navarro's men grabbed her, Dante said quickly, stepping back as if expecting a physical blow. They picked her up outside the bookshop 20 minutes ago. My guy on the street, he was in the bathroom. He missed the grab. He saw the van pulling away. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Luca stared at his brother. For a second, he didn't see Dante. He saw Mara. He saw her laughing in his kitchen. He saw her crying in his foyer. He saw the way she had looked at him before she left, broken, hopeful, and trusting him to keep her safe. You had one job, Luca whispered. The sound was low, vibrating with a raw, cold fury that made the seasoned soldiers in the room look at the floor. I told you to watch her. I told you she was invisible. We tried. Luca, Dante argued, desperate. She was living a normal life. We didn't think Navarro knew where she was. You didn't think, Luca roared, sweeping the maps and photos off the table with a violent crash. He braced his hands on the empty wood, his head hanging low, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had lied to himself. He had told himself he sent her away for her own good. He had told himself he could let her go. But he had never stopped watching. He had read the reports on what she bought for dinner. He knew what time she turned off her lights. He had kept her in his orbit because the thought of her truly vanishing was the only thing that scared him more than Navarro. And because of his half measures, she was gone. Get the car, Luca said, straightening up. His face was a mask of stone. Where are we going? Dante asked. We don't know where they took her. I know where Navarro takes things he wants to break, Luca said. He checked the magazine of his handgun, the metallic slide clicking into place. Call everyone. I don't care about the supply lines anymore. We are burning Navarro to the ground tonight. The warehouse was a rotting carcass of industry on the edge of the river. It smelled of rust, stagnant water, and fear. Mara was tied to a chair in the center of the main floor. Her wrists were bound behind her back with zip ties that dug into her skin. Her lip was split where one of the men had backhanded her for scratching him, and her cheek throbbed, but her head was high. A bright light shone in her face, blinding her. Behind the glare, she could hear a voice she recognized from the news. Ricardo Navarro. Set it up, Navarro commanded. Make sure the signal is strong. I want him to see every second He stepped into the light, holding a smartphone. He was older than Luca, heavier, with eyes that looked like wet stones. Say hello to your boyfriend. Sarah, Navarro sneered, pointing the camera at her. My name is Mara, she spat, staring directly into the lens. And he is not my boyfriend. He is the man who is going to end you. Navarro laughed, stepping closer. He gripped her chin, forcing her face toward the camera. You hear that, Moretti? She has spirit. Come alone to the old shipyard. Luca, or I start taking pieces off. I think I will start with these pretty eyes. He ended the stream and tossed the phone to one of his guards. You think he is coming for you? Navarro asked, circling her chair. He sent you away, girl. He threw you out like garbage. He sent me away to keep me from trash like you, Mara retorted. Her voice was shaking. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of her tears. You need a woman to get his attention, she taunted, channeling every ounce of Luca's arrogance she had absorbed. That is pathetic. Ricardo, no wonder you are losing the city. Navarro's face darkened. He raised his hand to strike her again. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse flickered and died. Total darkness swallowed the room. For a second, there was silence. Then, the sound of glass shattering high above echoed through the space. Navarro shouted, Get the backup lights, watch the doors. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks. It wasn't the spray and pray fire of amateurs. It was precise. Controlled bursts. Pop, 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 pop. Two of Navarro's men dropped before they even raised their weapons. Mara threw herself and the chair to the ground, rolling onto her side as bullets sparked against the concrete floor. The chaos was deafening. Shouts, the roar of assault rifles, the heavy thud of boots on metal. She saw shadows moving in the gloom, shapes that moved with lethal efficiency. One of Navarro's guards, panicked, backed up toward her, firing blindly into the darkness. He stumbled over the legs of her chair. Mara didn't hesitate. Adrenaline surged through her, overriding the pain in her wrists. She kicked out with both legs, driving her heels into the back of the guard's knees. He buckled with a cry of surprise, dropping his weapon and falling backward. His belt knife, a tactical blade in a sheath, clattered to the floor within inches of her face. Mara twisted her body, straining against the zip ties. She maneuvered her back toward the knife. Her fingers scrabbled against the cold concrete, searching. Got it. She gripped the handle awkwardly, her hands numb. She sawed the blade against the plastic of the zip ties. It cut her skin. Warm blood trickling down her wrists, but she didn't stop. Snap! Her hands flew apart. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing the knife properly now. The guard was trying to stand up. Mara swung a broken leg of the wooden chair she had been tied to, smashing it against his temple with a primal scream. He went down and stayed down. Mara looked around wildly. The warehouse was a strobe-lit nightmare of muzzle flashes. She saw a side exit, a heavy steel door that was slightly ajar. She sprinted toward it, keeping her head low. A figure stepped out of the smoke directly in front of her. Mara raised the knife, ready to fight. Mara! The voice was a roar. Rough and familiar, she froze. The figure lowered his weapon. It was Luca. He looked like a demon. His suit was torn, his face smeared with soot, and blood was soaking through the white sleeve of his shirt near his bicep. But his eyes were locked on her with a desperate, terrifying intensity. "Luca!" she sobbed, the knife clattering from her hand. She didn't stop running. She ran straight into him. He caught her with his good arm. Slamming her against his chest, he buried his face in her hair, breathing her in as if she was oxygen and he had been suffocating for hours. "I have you," he growled against her ear, his voice breaking. "I have you." They stood there for a heartbeat in the middle of the war zone, clinging to each other. "We have to go," Dante shouted from somewhere to their left. "The cops are 3 minutes out." Luca pulled back, gripping Mara's face with bloody hands. "Can you run?" he asked, scanning her face for injuries. "Yes," she gasped, wiping tears from her eyes. "Yes, then run," he commanded. "Stay with me. Do not let go of my hand." They ran. They burst out of the side door into the cool night air, leaving the ruin of Navarro's empire burning behind them. The safe house was quiet now. It was a different location, a small farmhouse miles outside the city limits. Mara sat on the edge of the bed in the master bedroom, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. Her hands were cleaned and bandaged where the zip ties had cut her. Her lips stung, but the trembling had finally stopped. Across the room, a medic was finishing wrapping Luca's upper arm. The bullet had grazed the muscle. Painful, but not life-threatening. Luca sat on a wooden chair, shirtless, staring at Mara the entire time. He hadn't looked away from her once. "Leave us," Luca said to the medic. "But boss, you need painkiller. Leave us." The medic nodded and packed his bag, closing the door softly behind him. Luca stood up. He walked over to the bed. He didn't sit next to her. He dropped to his knees on the floor between her legs. Mara looked down at him. The great Luca Moretti, the man who made the city tremble, was on his knees, his head bowed, his hands resting tentatively on her knees over the blanket. "I am sorry," he whispered. The words sounded like they were being torn out of his throat. "Luca." Mara started, reaching a hand out from the blanket. "No, let me say it," he interrupted, looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed, shining with unshed tears. "I thought I could protect you by sending you away. I thought if I pushed you out of my life, you would be safe. I was arrogant. I was stupid." He took a shaky breath. "I almost got you killed, Mara, because I was too afraid to admit that I couldn't function without knowing where you were. I'm so sorry." Mara looked at the blood on his temple, the bruise forming on his ribs, the bandage on his arm. He had walked through fire for her. Again, she slid off the bed, dropping the blanket, and sank to her knees in front of him. They were eye level now. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. Her thumbs brushed away the dried blood near his hairline. "You came for me," she said softly. I will always come for you, he vowed. Even if I have to burn the whole world down. Don't burn the world, Mara whispered, leaning her forehead against his. Just stay in it with me. Luca let out a shuddering sigh and closed the distance. The kiss was not hungry or desperate. It was devout. It was a prayer of gratitude. His lips were soft, careful, as if he was afraid she might shatter. Mara held onto his shoulders, feeling the solid reality of him, grounding herself in his warmth. They stayed like that for a long time, kneeling on the floor, holding each other as the adrenaline faded into exhaustion. Come on, Mara murmured, pulling back. You need to rest. She helped him up. They didn't bother changing. They lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed. Luca pulled her against his uninjured side, wrapping his arm around her waist like a vice. Mara rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. There was no talk of the future, no talk of Navarro. There was just the safety of the bed, and the weight of his arm, and the knowledge that they were both alive. When Mara woke up, the sun was streaming through the heavy curtains. Luca was awake. He was watching her, his hand idly stroking her hair. Morning, he rasped, his voice rough with sleep. Mara sat up, rubbing her face. She felt bruised and stiff, but her mind was crystal clear. The fear of the van ride, the clarity of the warehouse, it had shifted something in her. We need to talk, she said. Luca stiffened slightly, sitting up. If this is about you leaving, I will understand. I will set you up in Europe. I will... Stop, Mara said, placing a hand on his chest. I am not going to Europe, and I am not leaving. Luca looked at her, confusion warring with hope in his eyes. But things cannot go back to how they were. Mara continued, her voice firm. I am not going to be a secret you keep in a tower. I am not going to be a pet you protect. Then what do you want? Luca asked. I want a choice, Mara said. If I am going to risk my life to be with you, and clearly that is what this is, then I want a say in how we live it. I want to be a partner. Luca, not a possession. She looked him dead in the eye. And I don't want to live waiting for the next bullet. I don't want our children, if we ever have them, to grow up visiting their father in prison or a cemetery. Luca went still. The mention of children, of a future, seemed to strike him harder than any bullet. He looked at his hands, hands that knew violence, hands that had built an empire on fear. Then he looked at Mara. He saw the bruise on her cheek, a mark of his world stamped on her skin. He realized he had conquered the city, but he had almost lost the only thing that made the city worth living in. You are asking me to change everything, he said quietly. I am asking you to choose, Mara corrected. You can have the empire, or you can have me. You can't keep both the way they are now. Luca looked out the window at the distant tree line. He thought about his father. He thought about the fear in his mother's eyes. He thought about the empty penthouse. Then he looked back at Mara, the woman who didn't cook or clean, but who fought kidnappers with a chair leg and came back to the man who put her in danger. Okay, he said. Okay, Mara asked, blinking. We change it, Luca said, a new resolve hardening his voice. We dismantle the illegal operations. We pivot to legitimate logistics. It will be dangerous. It will be messy. My own men might turn on me. I don't care about messy, Mara said, a fierce smile touching her lips. I can handle messy. Luca reached out, taking her hand in his. He brought her knuckles to his lips, kissing the bandages there. Then let's burn it down, he whispered, and build something else. Together? Mara asked. Together, Luca promised. He pulled her back down into the pillows, not as a boss claiming a prize, but as a man holding on to his lifeline, and for the first time in his life. Luca Moretti didn't feel like he was waiting for the end. He felt like he was just beginning. The conference room in the safe house was thick with cigar smoke and the heavy, suffocating weight of betrayal. Luca stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on the scarred wood. Around him sat the remnants of his inner circle, Dante, Marco, and 3 of his most trusted captains. They were looking at him as if he had just announced he was joining a choir. You want us to do what? Marco asked, his voice low and vibrating with disbelief. We are going to give Navarro to the FBI, Luca said, his voice steady, and we are going to give them the shipping routes on the east side. You are talking about snitching. Luca, one of the captains growled, you are talking about breaking the oldest law we have. I am talking about survival, Luca countered, leaning forward. The world is changing. Cameras are everywhere. The feds have digital trails we cannot scrub. We are fighting a war we are destined to lose, either to a bullet or a prison cell. I am offering a third way. A way out? Dante asked. Skepticism warring with hope in his eyes. A transition, Luca corrected. We legitimize. We take the capital we have, the logistics network, the security personnel, and we go clean. No more drugs, no more weapons, no more looking over our shoulders wondering if the car is going to explode when we turn the key. Marco slammed his fist on the table. It is a fantasy. The feds will never let us walk. They want your head on a spike. Luca, they want Navarro more, Luca said, and they want the win. We give them the biggest bust in Graybridge history, and in exchange, we get to keep the legitimate side of the business. Marco stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. You have gone soft. It is the girl, isn't it? She has poisoned you. She opened my eyes, Luca said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And if you ever speak of her with disrespect again, Marco, you won't live to see the transition. Marco stared at him, his face purple with rage. Then he spat on the floor. I am out, Marco said. I am not working with the feds, and I am not taking orders from a man who takes business advice from his mistress. He stormed out. 2 of the captains followed him. The room felt emptier, but the air was cleaner. Luca looked at Dante. Are you leaving too? Dante looked at the door, then back at his brother. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I hate paperwork, Luca, but I hate funerals more. I am in. The meeting with Agent Rachel Kincaid took place in a diner on the outskirts of the city, a neutral ground that smelled of grease and stale coffee. Mara sat in the booth, her hands clasped in front of her. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, but her posture had changed. The slump of the exhausted bartender was gone. In its place was the steel of a woman who had survived a kidnapping and walked out of the fire holding the hand of the devil. Kincaid slid into the booth opposite her, tossing a file onto the laminate table. You have a lot of nerve, Mara, Kincaid said, her eyes hard. I offered you a lifeline, and you ran back to him. Now you want a meeting? I'm not asking for a lifeline anymore, Mara said calmly. I am offering you a career-making arrest. Kincaid raised an eyebrow. I am listening. Ricardo Navarro, Mara said. We know where his main distribution hub is. We know when the next shipment is coming in. And we know he is planning a meeting to negotiate a truce with Luca. And what does Luca get out of this? Kincaid asked. Cynical. He takes out his competition and I do his dirty work? He gets out, Mara said. Kincaid laughed. It was a sharp, incredulous bark. Men like Luca Moretti do not get out. They get buried. He's willing to plead guilty to racketeering charges, Mara said, ignoring the interruption. He will forfeit the illegal assets. He will submit to federal oversight for his remaining businesses for 10 years. In exchange, you minimize the prison time to probation and time served, and you let him run the legitimate logistics firm. Kincaid stared at her. You are serious. Dead serious, Mara said. You get Navarro. You get the Moretti crime family off the streets because he dissolves it himself. You clean up the city in one night, or you can chase him for another 5 years while bodies pile up. Your choice. Agent. Kincaid drummed her fingers on the table. She looked at Mara, really looked at her, searching for the fear she had seen in the grocery store. She found none. Set up the meeting, Kincaid said. But if this is a trap, Mara, I will make sure you share a cell with him. The negotiation that followed was the hardest thing Mara had ever done. They met in a secure FBI conference room. Luca looked like a caged tiger, wearing a suit that cost more than the agent's annual salaries combined, vibrating with disdain for the people across the table. Kincaid sat with her supervisors, men who looked at Luca with undisguised loathing. It was tense. It was hostile. Every time Luca snarled a refusal or Kincaid threatened to walk, the deal teetered on the edge of collapse. We are not giving you the names of the lower-level runners, Luca snapped, leaning back in his chair. They are kids trying to feed their families. I take the heat. They walk. That is obstruction, Kincaid argued. That is loyalty, Luca fired back. Something you government types wouldn't understand. Stop it, Mara cut in. Her voice was not loud, but it silenced the room. She looked at Luca. Give them the structure, but protect the identities of the non-violent personnel. She turned to Kincaid. Accept the leadership decapitation and let the foot soldiers go. You don't have the budget to prosecute 200 drivers anyway. She was the bridge. She translated Luca's code of honor into terms the FBI could accept, and she translated the Bureau's bureaucratic demands into logic Luca could respect. She was relentless. She was brilliant. By the end of the third day, the papers were signed, the sting was set, the industrial yard was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken glass, located on the waterfront where the city's pollution met the Gray River. It was the perfect place for a truce, or a massacre. It was midnight. Fog rolled off the water, thick and cloying. Luca stood in the center of the yard, flanked by Dante and 4 of his remaining loyal men. They were unarmed, part of the agreement for the truce meeting, but the FBI tactical teams hiding in the shipping containers around them were very much armed. Mara was a quarter of a mile away, sitting in a surveillance van with Kincaid. She stared at the monitors, her hands gripping the edge of the console until her knuckles turned white. He looks exposed, Mara whispered, watching the grainy black and white image of Luca standing alone in the clearing. He has to sell it, Kincaid said, adjusting her headset. If Navarro smells a trap, he walks. A convoy of headlights cut through the fog. 3 heavy SUVs rolled into the yard, crunching over the gravel. They stopped in a formation that blocked the exit. Ricardo Navarro stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was smiling, but it was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. He had 12 men with him. All of them had their hands inside their jackets. You came, Navarro called out, his voice echoing in the silence. And you brought the little brother. How touching. I am here to end this, Ricardo, Luca said, his voice carrying clearly over the hidden microphones. We are done bleeding. Done? Navarro laughed, walking closer. We are just getting started. I heard you lost some men. Luca, I heard your Captain Marco came crying to me yesterday, telling me you were selling us all out to the feds. In the van. Mara gasped. Marco. He had turned. Kincaid swore. Abort. It is blown. He knows. Wait, Mara shouted, grabbing Kincaid's arm. If you move now, he kills Luca. In the yard, the air shifted. Navarro pulled a heavy pistol from his coat. You thought you could set me up? Navarro sneered. You are a dinosaur. Luca, extinct. He raised the gun. Now, Luca roared, dropping to the ground. The FBI snipers didn't wait. The first shot took out the tire of Navarro's lead SUV. The second shattered the windshield. Flashbangs detonated, turning the night into a blinding white void. FBI! Drop your weapons! Chaos erupted. Navarro's men opened fire, spraying bullets wildly into the darkness. Luca's men scrambled for cover behind the rusted machinery. Navarro didn't run. He was screaming orders, firing at the shipping containers where the agents were advancing. Luca was pinned down behind a stack of pallets. The wood was disintegrating under the hail of gunfire from Navarro's position. He's trapped! Mara screamed at the monitor. He can't move. Luca looked around. He saw Dante pinned down 10 yards away, his cover failing. He saw the FBI team struggling to flank Navarro's heavy machine gunner. He made a choice. Luca stood up. He stepped out from behind the pallets, walking into the open, his arms spread wide. Over here, Ricardo, he bellowed. You want me? Come and get me. The gunfire shifted instantly. Every barrel turned toward Luca. No, Mara screamed, her hand finding the radio button on the console. Luca, get down! Navarro turned, a look of pure hatred twisting his face. He leveled his gun at Luca's chest. Luca stood his ground, buying the FBI the precious seconds they needed. Luca, eyes on me. Mara's voice crackled through the earpiece in Luca's ear. It was the only sound that cut through the noise of battle. I am right here. Stay with me. The sound of her voice grounded him. He didn't flinch. Kincaid's team breached the flank. "Drop it!" Navarro spun around, too late. 3 agents tackled him to the ground. The machine gunner was neutralized. The rest of the crew threw down their weapons. Realizing it was over, Luca let out a breath, his knees buckling slightly. He looked up at the camera mounted on the light pole, knowing she was watching. He was alive. The fallout was swift and brutal, but it was legal. Navarro was denied bail, facing a mountain of evidence that Mara and Luca had provided. His organization crumbled overnight. For Luca, the victory was bittersweet. He stood in a federal courtroom 2 weeks later. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy. Under the terms of the deal Mara had brokered, his sentence was commuted to 5 years of strict probation, a massive fine that wiped out his liquid assets, and the forfeiture of Moretti imports. He walked out of the courthouse a free man, but a much poorer one, outside. The press was in a frenzy. Luca ignored them. He walked down the steps to where a simple sedan was waiting. Dante was leaning against the car. He looked lighter, younger. "So," Dante said, "we are civilians now." "It seems so," Luca said, adjusting his cuff. "Half the crew left this morning," Dante said. "They said they couldn't work for a rat." "Let them go," Luca said. "We don't need soldiers anymore. We need truck drivers and accountants." He looked past Dante to the passenger seat. The window rolled down. Mara was there. She was wearing sunglasses, looking like a movie star in hiding. She lowered the glasses and smiled at him. It wasn't the smile of a victim or a witness. It was the smile of a partner. "Get in," she said. "We have work to do." 6 months later, the offices of Ellis Moretti Logistics were located in a refurbished warehouse in the Arts District. It was smaller than the glass tower, with exposed brick walls and open desks. It buzzed with the energy of legitimate work. Mara walked through the floor, holding a tablet. She was the director of operations. She was good at it. She used her degree, her sharp mind, and her terrifying organizational skills to run the place like a Swiss watch. She stopped at the glass-walled office in the back. Luca was on the phone. He wasn't wearing a 3-piece suit. He was wearing dress slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. Honest work was exhausting, but the shadows under his eyes were gone. The constant predator tension that had defined him was replaced by a focused intensity. He saw her and wrapped up the call. "We got the contract," he said as she walked in. "The city approved our bid for the municipal transport? Legally?" Mara teased. Sitting on the edge of his desk, 100% legally, Luca said, leaning back in his chair. "Though the paperwork nearly killed me. I almost missed the days of just bribing the councilman." "Don't even joke," Mara said, tapping his nose with her stylus. "Agent Kincaid is coming for an audit on Thursday." Luca groaned, but he was smiling. He reached out, hooking his hands around her waist and pulling her between his knees. "Let her come," he said. "We have nothing to hide." He rested his forehead against her stomach. "You saved me." "Mara," he whispered. "You know that? You saved yourself." "Luca," she said, running her hand through his hair. "I just gave you a reason to do it." The apartment was in a brownstone in the historic district. It had creaky floors, a fireplace that didn't work, and a kitchen that was cozy rather than industrial. It was raining outside, a soft autumn drizzle that tapped against the window pane. Inside, the smoke alarm was chirping. Mara stood in the kitchen, waving a dish towel frantically at the open oven door. A frozen pizza, now a blackened disk of charcoal, sat on the rack, emitting thick gray smoke. "Oh my God," she coughed, laughing despite herself. "I forgot about it. I was answering emails." Luca walked in from the bedroom, barefoot and wearing sweatpants. He took in the scene, the smoke, the ruined dinner, the woman he loved waving a towel like a surrender flag. He didn't yell. He didn't call a chef. He laughed. It was a rich, deep sound that filled the small apartment. "I thought something was burning," he said, walking over to disable the alarm with a quick jab of his finger. "It is not funny," Mara protested, tossing the towel onto the counter. "I am starving." "I told you," she said, turning to face him, crossing her arms over her chest with mock defiance. "I don't cook or clean." She shrugged, unapologetic, her eyes dancing with mirth. Luca stepped up behind her. He slid his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the scent of her shampoo and the faint smell of burnt crust. "Good," he murmured against her skin, the vibration running through her. He pressed a kiss to the sensitive spot below her ear. "I still only want you to stay in my bed." Mara shivered, the old thrill racing down her spine. It was the same line that had started it all, but the context had changed completely. It wasn't a command from a boss to a subordinate. It was a promise between equals. She turned in his arms, hooking her fingers into the collar of his t-shirt. "Is that so?" she whispered. "That is so," he confirmed. She kissed him. It was deep and slow, tasting of familiarity and lingering heat. It was the kiss of two people who knew each other's worst sins and loved each other anyway. They pulled apart, foreheads touching. "Pizza delivery?" Luca suggested. "Thai food," Mara countered. "Done." Later that night, the city lights filtered through the sheer curtains of the bedroom window. They lay together in the tangled sheets. Mara rested her head on Luca's chest, her ear pressed over his heart. It beat steadily, a strong, rhythmic thud that was no longer a countdown to violence. She thought about the girl she used to be, the girl who worked 2 jobs she hated, who let her family make her feel small, who thought independence meant being alone. She thought about the penthouse, the kidnapping, the fear, and she smiled. She had fought for this. She had fought for him, and she had fought for herself. She wasn't a maid. She wasn't a trophy. She was the CEO of her own life, and the partner of a man who looked at her like she was the sun. "You are thinking too loud," Luca murmured, his hand tracing patterns on her arm. "I was just thinking that I am happy," she said honestly. Luca tightened his hold on her. "The bed feels empty when you are not in it," he whispered into the dark. Mara laced her fingers with his, holding on tight. "I am not going anywhere. Luca, as long as you remember the deal." "Partner," he said. "Not possession, partner." She agreed. They lay there in the quiet dark, hand in hand. 2 survivors who had walked through the fire and found a way to build a home in the ashes. The future was uncertain, and the world was still dangerous. But as long as they were together, they could handle anything, and they definitely wouldn't be cooking. "Thank you so much for listening to I Don't Cook or Clean," she said. Mafia boss smirked. "Good. I only want you to stay in my bed." It has been a journey bringing Mara and Luca's story to life, from the neon lights of the nightclub to the quiet peace of their new beginning. I hope you enjoyed the ride as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a rainy city like Graybridge or somewhere sunny? Please leave a comment down below and let me know. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories and sharing your thoughts in English. Your support means the world and helps us bring more of these passionate, gritty tales to life. Until next time, stay safe and keep reading.